from the title here of my talk that at USDA we view the issue as local and regional food systems, not simply local markets. And a lot of this work comes from my collaboration with Gary Madison at the Farm Credit Council. He is responsible for young, beginning, and small farm programs and outreach. Okay, so in order to assess the modest opportunities that I'm going to make the case for, we really basically have 4 questions that I want to look at. First, in terms of economic development, where does local fit in? Next, in view from the farm gate, does local matter? Next, what are the underlying forces that are the factors that are shaping local and regional food systems? Here, when we talk about economic development, we're really moving to a different plane. We're talking about forces that propel transformations. And so these forces, these underlying factors may be in operation for decades, but will most recently have catalyzed the growth of local food systems. And lastly, in terms of farm community linkages, can they become pivots for economic development? Okay, in this first slide, the processes of economic development are more encompassing than that of just simple economic growth. And it involves institutional change in government or governance, and it's quite extensive. This fractal image here is really designed to make one simple point, and that is the processes of economic development occur at all levels. So here in this image, you can see the development churn existing at local, regional, and national levels. It's just that when you move to a regional level, we have a different vocabulary and a different set of tools that we look at. But it's really the same processes, the same incentives, the same formation of social institutions. At the local level, often this is conditioned by geography, population density, and proximity to urban markets. So if there is going to be any potential development impacts from local food systems, it's going to occur at the local level. And this is driven by 2 stylized facts here. First, we know that most intensively developed local food systems are in areas that are in proximity to urban markets. The second thing we know is that small and medium-sized farmers make up a disproportionate share of local food systems producers. So that's the thing that where we're going to find any potential for economic development will be at the local areas. Now, does local matter? Well, this is a view from the farm gate. I really work with the farm gate. My colleague Gary Madison has coined this term retail agriculture to really encompass all the marketing forms of sustainably produced healthy food. And to give you an idea here, here's a diagram, and what this shows you is that the marketing channels here encompass overlapping local, regional, and national direct markets. Okay? Notice the emphasis here is on dollars flowing through marketing channels, not distance, not some arbitrary designed typology. And from the view from the farmer, this doesn't matter. Okay? The farmer will sell whichever optimal set of marketing channels are available for direct markets. Let me give you an example. When the Vogel and Low, or the Low and Vogel report first came out on marketing channel, farmers' participation in marketing channels, I got in this enthusiastic call from a farmer growing organic duck outside of the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. He would supply restaurateurs and some retailers fresh organic duck. His second largest market was in Kansas City. He had a website. They found his product attractive. It was a growing market, and even when he could deliver it in 48 hours, fresh organic duck, it was marketed as local duck. Now, from the vantage point of the Kansas City consumer, it's not local. From the vantage point of the consumer, if you think you're helping this particular farmer and you care about economic viability, it is local in that sense. But from the farmer, he'll sell where he can. So here's another concept. So for me, local and regional food systems really is sort of a geographic space-based subset of retail agriculture. It's what's on the ground. Here's where local matters. So this farmer in Pittsburgh has this viability, that he is trying to make a living, and the impact of his survivability is going to affect his local community. The other thing that's the other key about this sector, and I call it a sector because I think it's an emerging sector and we don't really have a name for it. So we haven't settled on anything. But the third, of course, is the shared values among producers and consumers, stakeholder groups. These are defining market transactions that go beyond simple price and quantity, some of that deal with sustainability, price transparency. Okay, so let's push this concept a little further and say, how large is it in the United States? Well, Madison and Hunch developed this rough ballpark estimate, and I only call it a ballpark estimate, in terms of let's add together food or farmers' product that is going through local channels that is surveyed in the farm level data surveys that I work with, and then add on top of that organic sales. And all these surveys are administered by USDA. We come up with about 7.6 billion in 2008. An updated measure of that is 7.85 billion, and it adds, in addition, $355 million in sales from farm to school sales. This is the first census of school districts that have ever been undertaken by the Food and Nutrition Service, and so it's a new measure. I'd like to make 2 points here. First is that food system agriculture, and this is what I'm going to call it throughout the rest of the presentation, food system agriculture is more than the value of production in 2008 for cotton and rice combined. It is not simply going to farmers markets. 7 out of the 10 retailers now, of top 10 retailers in the United States, source locally too. So it's much, much broader. In 2012, the number one trend was local in both restaurateurs and in the grocery industry. The second thing here, and this really needs to be stressed to those of us who look at the statistics, national income or national collection data systems are conceptually not equipped to actually measure the true scope of this. And the way you can see this is just look at the second estimate. Okay, the second estimate includes farm to school sales for the academic year 2011 to 2012. At the time when we administered the 2011 ARMS survey, we asked farmers for the first time to report farm to school sales. We found none, 0. Why? How can this be? Well, what has actually occurred is that the ARMS survey that I work with, it oversamples large farms and farms in 15 core states. So, but on the other hand, 75% of farm to school sales occur in the northeastern states, New York, Pennsylvania, New England. And there are very few farmers in our national sample. So it completely misses it. Like I said, it's ill-equipped to handle it. So I can't get the data, and we need this data at the county level if we are to actually look at economic potential of of the food system agriculture. Now I'm going to switch gears here because one of the things that's interesting when Gary and I were thinking through this is food system agriculture going to stay? And when we concluded that it was, we next had to ask ourselves, how did it evolve to this point and where is it going? So we're going to look at underlying forces or underlying factors that are propelling food system agriculture. And I'm going to mention 3. The first is the revolution in information communications technology, or ICT. And there we go. What I call Internet 1.0 occurred in the 90s when we laid down the virtual highways, the knowledge storage centers, and we began experimenting with B2B work. So it was in kind of its infancy. And at that time in 1999, in his presidential address before the AAEA, John Antle asserted that ICT was helping consumers, putting them in the driver's seat in terms of shaping the demands for agriculture. And we've seen this resonate here in Richard Sexton's address and some of the other presentations. Moreover, Professor Antle also suggested that that ICT would improve the efficiencies of the existing economies of scale of the agri-food system. But let's look at Internet 2.0. In Internet 2.0, what has changed? Well, we've seen ramped up speeds, we've seen invention of completely new electronic devices, new communication platforms, cloud computing, big data. We've seen a tremendous amount of innovation, and how has this shaped local foods? Okay, I'm going to argue that it's done it in two ways. First, it's weakened 20th century economies of scale in the value supply or in the food supply chain by creating market openings for small and medium-sized farmers. And the two examples I'm going to give you are National Market Maker. It started in 2004 for the state of Illinois. It would provide information matching producers with consumers in that state. It's now operated in 20 states. It's a web portal, web platform. Organic Valley is a dairy cooperative of about 700 million in sales in 2012. It operates as a virtual enterprise. Okay, it basically links together horizontally 43 milk pools, and within each milk pool, it arranges contracts between local organic milk producers, processors, and trucking firms. And that's important at the community level. Okay, the second way that Internet 2.0 has facilitated or catalyzed food system agriculture is it's breaking down the geographic barriers to the diffusion of tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is learning by doing knowledge that has yet to be codified. Scholars in the internet age 1.0 have often asserted that the social capital and trust relationships embedded in the diffusion of tacit knowledge are what circumscribe or describe the geographic boundaries of regional clusters. And I've been thinking about this, and I'm thinking that what ICT does with these new communication platforms is that it is breaking down these geographic barriers, and much of the trust relationships and social capital will be found partially in virtual space. The example that I'm going to use here, and there are many more, and this isn't even the best one, according to Gary, is Local Harvest. It started out in 2000 as a national directory of community-supported agricultural arrangements, but by now it also now offers consulting services and it develops software for CSAs and for food hubs, as well as operating a e-commerce storefront that matches consumers who want to purchase organic, locally produced organic commodities. Okay, whoops, there we go. All right, the next factor that I'm going to look at, underlying factor, is social entrepreneurship and shared value creation, these twin concepts. A social entrepreneur uses a innovative business model to address a societal problem. Okay, social entrepreneurs there are two characteristics that distinguish them from philanthropy. Social entrepreneurs, they can either be a for-profit company with a mission-driven strategy, often sometimes farmers actually spin this off, or they can be a nonprofit with a income-earning strategy. And the interesting thing is that this allows them to basically have a strategy over time that allows for a mission-driven enterprise diversification. And the example I'm going to use here simply is DC Kitchen. Since 1989, DC Central Kitchen has been providing meals to low-income and at-risk households in the Washington, D.C. area. But today, it's almost a conglomerated enterprise. In addition to the original service it provides, it operates a food hub. It has a culinary school for the unemployed. It operates a gleaning enterprise, farm to school, as well as it now has an enterprise that delivers fresh vegetables to corner stores inside DC food deserts. So this is part of the local food perspective that we're looking at. It's more than just going to Whole Foods or going to a farmer's market. Shared value creation is a concept pushed by Porter and Kramer. They state it's a rather ambitious contention that companies must recommit themselves to solving social ills in order to that economic progress will continue. Okay, and what they argue is that when companies put resources into alleviating social harm in the communities that they reside, that they're going to create new sources of profit for themselves, new economic value, and and that's where the concept of shared value creation starts. I've seen bits and pieces of it discussed here in this conference, and the example that, or one of the main examples they use, I'm going to use an update, and that is Walmart. Okay, Walmart in 2010 announced a commitment to try and source 10% of its fresh produce locally. But this is a multi-pronged project in which they have announced that they have their own sustainability index. It may be open for subject to debate among stakeholders, but they also have created programs to teach sustainable production methods to small and medium-sized farmers, as well as they're configuring their distribution network to provide healthy food access to underserved areas. This is mostly taking place in the southern states where some of our strike force, federal strike force initiatives are going on. Okay, so the third force that I want to allude to and really discuss really is what brings us here. And this is the exercise of voice. Okay, and we're going to view it through the prism of public sector initiatives. I can speak to what's in the United States. I suspect there's similar ones at the local, regional level also. And in Albert Hirschman's Exit Voice and Loyalty, a dissatisfied consumer exits the market. Full stop. Economists, we move on. But this dissatisfied consumer can also complain or exercise voice. If this dissatisfied consumer exercise voice in a political or social sphere, there's a likelihood that collective action can arise, hence the emergence of food system stakeholder groups. The difference is here, instead of the dissatisfied consumer, originally, decades ago, this were started with dissatisfied producers, and then dissatisfied consumers joined. I view today's public sector initiatives as sort of outcomes of the exercise of voice over time, as well as buy-in. And so let's look at the federal level. First, the 2008 Farm Bill was a watershed legislation. Although there were few programs that directly supported local food system agriculture, there was program language in every single title of this big, massive bill that indirectly gave indirect assistance and support. Since 2009, USDA has funded $337 million worth of projects spread throughout the United States. 50% of these, almost 50%, are basically infrastructural projects, but another 21% are dedicated to beginning and small farmers. And then another 16% are looking at healthy food access. In other words, this is an umbrella program that is looking at programs spanning farm to fork. Okay, and we are beginning to see buy-in by other federal departments. Okay, it's particularly related to funding of food hubs. They're virtual and or physical aggregators that pull together local foods from farmers, teach farmers good business practices, and then in a sense send them on to the markets. The Department of Transportation accounts for 50% of these investments in the 2011-2012 period. Okay, at the state level, I just thought I'd highlight these two things. Here's the Illinois Food and Farms Jobs Act in 2007. At some point in the future, and I forget the date, I'm sorry, they want to have 20% of the fresh produce purchased in the state of Illinois supplied by Illinois farmers. It's quite an ambitious act. But the one that just recently passed, it's kind of interesting, is the Louisiana Purchase Plan, in which 4% of all purchases made by restaurateurs will be given a cash rebate by the state for purchasing local foods. So we're seeing buy-in here. We're in a state where there's a lot, or in a stage where there's a lot of experimentation, there's a lot of trial and error. Okay, now the last thing. Can farm community linkages become development pivots? I'm going to look at three, and they're the usual suspects: direct linkages, indirect linkages, and dynamic linkages. But I'm going to do it a little differently. Direct linkages, these of course are farm system producers' expenditures on inputs and how they percolate through the system. But I'm going to use a different metric. This is not an input-output exercise. Farm, and I'm using ARMS data that I've been working with. Food system producers spend on average $176,000 dollars more per $1 million in gross farm output than non-participants. So if you're in an area where there's a concentration of farms participating in local food systems, this is going to be an additional impact. But this isn't even the largest one. It's the indirect linkages that are even larger. Okay, farm household consumer expenditures. Okay, food system farm households spend on average $213,000 more per $1 million in gross farm sales than non-participants. These two, to me, are two pivots, two fulcrums by which I can begin to think about what is the impact of food systems on economic development in surrounding rural areas. Okay, but I have no data. I have no data that I can trust. It's not even measuring the right thing yet. Okay, dynamic linkages. This is usually how one perceives when you invest in infrastructure, whether it's virtual infrastructure or physical. It could be a food hub, it could be a local meat processing facility. The idea is imagine a food system catchment area in which at the center is an urban market surrounded by farmers residing in rural communities. The investment takes place, transportation and marketing costs go down, demand picks up. This induces farmers to become more productive in the catchment area, but it also brings in new farmers from further outlying areas because of the reductions in cost. This creates a larger catchment area. The food system has expanded. Growth creates obstacles. In order to overcome growth or these obstacles, we need more innovation and in institutions and in marketing channel development. And this is what you have, what economic development economists have talked about when they talk about virtuous cycles. And it would continue as long as there's an increase in demand for their product. Okay, so in conclusion, well, let me push this button. There we go. Food system agriculture is transforming a segment of U.S. farm to fork. I'm not claiming it's big. I'm not claiming it's going to take over anything. It's still going to be small. But the point is that there's a lot of industrious cacophony going on at this point. There's both in governance at all levels, farmers organizing with other stakeholder groups, and it's just an amazing to see all the variation. The dynamic factors continue to push the innovation envelope. I don't think we've seen anywhere near how things are going to be organized. For example, the Healthy Food to Healthcare is a consortium of about 57 hospital organizations. Kaiser Permanente has been instrumental in this. They've started food hubs. So they're beginning to create market arrangements irrespective of traditional markets. Food system farmers generate larger linkages. I just don't know what to do with these pivots yet. And then finally, can food system agriculture be a source of economic growth, which was one of the original questions that was asked for me to think about. And my answer is it's too early to tell, but I think the pieces are being put into place. Maybe in 3, 4, 5 years I can give you that answer. Thank you.